Assalamu alaikum, friends of BookBytes. We're ending this season on a very, very fun note. They say you can take the Indian out of the village, but you can't take the village out of the Indian. And the Village Indian is the fun second memoir type of writing from Vanessa Govender. I've had absolute delight and joy reading this book over the past few days. And when I talk about this concept of village, and it's very well encapsulated in her story, I talk about community. I think that our communities rely on those circles of support, understanding, joy, celebration, and commiseration during times of good and bad. And I think it really comes through so well in the anecdotal references in this book. I take great pleasure in welcoming Vanessa Govender on the show today. She's an award-winning former television and radio news journalist and the author of the best-selling memoir Beaten But Not Broken, a courageous piece of writing, and the children's book The Selfish Shongololo we have recently on the shelves, The Village Indian. Vanessa, welcome to Book Bites. Wonderful to have a chance to chat to you this evening. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me on.
So you've been having this amazing time right now that the book has just been launched, and you've been doing all these readings around the country with more to follow. What's it been like? Where did the Village Indian story begin for you, and what's it been like sharing it with readers?
So we first moved into this village in 2018, right? This September it's going to be 7 years. And as you can imagine, it's a small little village in a flung remote area in the Western Cape in South Africa, where it seems nothing much ever happens. If you were to drive past, it would look like nothing much ever happens. But there is such an energy, there is such an electricity, there's such a sense of community, there's all these stories that are continuously happening. It is crazy, it is chaotic, it is charming, it is magical. So the idea for the village Indian, I'm obviously in a very minority in this village. I have a mixed race family. And so it was all these things that would happen around you. And, you obviously become very aware of your identity and your culture, right? And I stick out for obvious reasons, my experiences, because this is South Africa, right? And we do have some strange things that go on, wonderful things at times, strange things at times. And just to kind of tell that story through a very Indian lens.
I think it's fantastic how it's come through in the telling of the Village Indian. Because, I mean, they are, like you say, stories of community that make, and so many aspects of the references you make that make this a quintessential South African story. And not to say being South African is by any means monolithic, but you've captured so many of the variants of being South African in this small space. And you have an eye for story and you have an eye for detail, clearly. Um, what's it been like interacting with different people, and what's it just been like writing their story and with the empathy that you do so as well?
So, I mean, I come from Chatsworth, which is a predominantly and historically Indian township. I'm one of very many. Here, I'm literally one of maybe a handful or less. So, so what happens in the context of that of this village, in all my Indianness, with my mixed children and my mixed husband, my white husband as well, right? But how do you deliver this without having to kind of force it down somebody's throat? How do you tell some stories in a way that it's received in the spirit in which it's intended? And there's a very strong element of reconciliation with this book, right? Because some experiences have not been so pleasant. it is South Africa. It is our landscape. It is the reality. It's the nature of the beast. It's impossible to go anywhere where these little elements of prejudice or discrimination don't surface. How do you handle it when you are confronted with it? I've never really had to deal with it before because I've lived with Indian people. And I thought humor is something that is such a profoundly, I always say it's a South African superpower that we have, our ability to be able to laugh and crack a joke even when things are very serious. And I thought if I do write this and write it through a very Indian lens and using Indian lingo, that those uncomfortable aspects can be not well, yeah, can be softened, because you want people to understand your story and your lived experience, right? And in understanding, maybe also have an epiphany sort of moment in terms of how we all, African stories. They are our South African stories. They're messy, they're uncomfortable, sometimes they're inconvenient. And let's face it, we have this thing where we can laugh at each other, we can laugh at ourselves. And that is what I attempted to do here, was also, you know, laugh at myself and my own preconceived ideas, even looking at my own prejudices, and being able to say, yes, I might have been prejudiced there. Our stereotypes of people as well. And it's all there. And I think for me, the humor part of it had to be a very strong element because I did not want it to be a heavy book, where you just like read the first couple of pages, oh, another book about racism or whatever, No, I think, the humor part of it plays a very important role.
I think your book also speaks to the power of moving beyond your comfort zone. Because in our own sort of hovels and communities, as apartheid structures once dictated, there's almost this communal instinct for each other and a sense of forgiveness for our trespasses. And as soon as you step outside of that, you're suddenly having to, in a way, fend for yourself. Reprogram your thinking, challenge your prior assumptions. Let's talk about migration and change within the borders of South Africa, as you've done and written about. This concept of moving and moving outside of the borders of comfort, both in your mind and physically, and what that can offer in a reflective person such as yourself.
So it's a lifestyle that's completely different to what I've grown up with.
Mm.
If anybody, if there's anybody who knows anything about Chatsworth, how pretty much everybody knows everybody else's business. There's that sense of community. It's pulsating with its own energy. Chatsworth, I always say, is like almost like a country on its own. And coming into a village, far away from everything, where there isn't that kind of vibrancy and energy, which is, so typically Chatsworth, it allows almost, it does allow a person to almost, I wouldn't say reinvent yourself, but there's a sense of becoming, right? I left Durban shortly after the launch of my memoir, which was a very traumatic experience in even writing it. So when I arrived here, arrived here almost in parts, right? Because my actual process of healing was only just starting, actually. And so I came here and I came here in parts. And through time, those parts of me, started to come together. I started becoming. And so much of the things, that I once would have overlooked or I would never have spoken out against or taken a stand against are now things that I've become emphatically and fiercely proud of. And, I'm not the person I was before I came here. You know, we get to stand up and speak out for things. And sometimes when the opportunity does present itself, we don't always take it because of fear, right? And I found, it's a very spiritual, soulful place. And literally all of that amalgamated to create that sense of healing. spiritually and emotionally and mentally. Um, and that is what, that is what it's done for me. And it's a world completely unlike what I've come from. It's a world completely, I mean, a world that I'm so completely unused to. And I found my place, and that question of identity, because one would think, okay, you're in a minority, but like, where's identity here? My identity has become even more emphatic. I've become more fiercely protective of my identity and my culture and my background. But that's not to say that any of those things should ever be sort of an obstacle in terms of bridging divides, harmony, race relations. I cannot be so facile to say that I need to hold on to that if it means you and I cannot connect. And it's all those things that, you talk about reflection. It's not just the reflection, it is the actual implementation of it too.
I think that's beautiful. You know, they often say life offers these amazing opportunities for growth if you're receptive to it, and clearly you are, and it comes through in these stories. And I mean, you tell these stories in anecdotal ways, and there's some laugh out loud moments, and there's some sort of rather sobering moments, but your ideology comes across very clearly and very beautifully as well. I mean, I want to refer to first, let me put you on the spot. Is home a place or a person, right? You call a place called home. Is home a place or a person for you?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I stepped in here and I had an affinity, and it's a place I've never been to, and it like immediately it grabbed me. It grabbed me in and held me, and I'd never been here. So, you know, home is my family. Wherever we are home. But where you are physically, where you choose to settle, where you it's more building structure. I eat here, I sleep here. This is where I live. No, home is a little bit more than that. It's the spirituality of where you are. It's what a place does for you, what it invokes in you, what it evokes in you. And that for me is home. So I've got my family with me, so I'm always going to be home. But here, um, here is definitely home. So it is a place and it's people. It's a place and it's people.
Absolutely lovely. And you've created a circle of community. I mean, one of the laugh out loud moments that I talk about is when you actually talk about going to find some hens, because now there's this wholesome lifestyle set out before you with these wonderful intentions, and you need to buy roosters and chickens. And, you know, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, buying hens from Henrietta, what are the chances of that? You're living your own
Exactly.
fairy tale right here.
Yeah. No, so the chickens were a wonderful thing. I mean, we had great ambitions of living this very organic life, right, and very sustainable sort of life. We're going to grow our own vegetables. We're going to have our own hens, and so we can have our own eggs and that sort of thing. It proved to be more trouble than it was actually worth. It was chaotic. It was wonderful. It was chaotic, and eventually. After some uh, rather shameful escapades of the chickens escaping and going to neighbors' yards, and then the dogs attacking the chickens. And then we had far too many eggs, which we were then having to give out. But now we're paying to feed these chickens. So economically, it wasn't making sense. And those chickens had to be rehomed. I'm not someone ever who would knowing what I know about myself and those that do know me, would have ever thought I would be raising chickens. I am a city slicker through and through, but I am not that anymore.
Well, I'm very impressed because the entrepreneurial spirit has definitely come out. You're now the, is it the Spice Queen, the Spice Girl,
Ye-
the Curry Queen? Let's talk about some of the business ideas that have come up because I think that's fascinating.
so when you're living out in the sticks, right? And this is not just even unique to me. It's the community that I am in. people are very enterprising. Remember, we don't have the access that city people have to, multitude of malls and shops and whatever.
Right.
So people are self-sustaining here in terms of people are growing their own stuff, people are making their own stuff. Um, and when you are surrounded by that, how can you not be inspired by that? Right? So everyone's doing all these amazing, wonderful things. And I thought, well, gosh, I've got to do something with myself. I can't just, be watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians all the time. I've got to do something with myself. And I thought, well, there's actually no other Indians around. Well, there's like maybe a couple more. But where do we get spices from? I had to get my spices every time we went back to Durban. Um, and I thought, well, my mum makes our chili powder from scratch. And I thought, well, let me do that. I've got a captive audience. People are always saying that they can't find spices. And I thought I'd give it a shot, and it actually turned out to be quite lucrative. And people are also are always pining for curry. We don't have restaurants that do curries, like proper Durban curries. And I can make curry like it's nobody's business, and people love it. And I do pop-up curry nights, which is a great success. And and everybody just waits for that. When the message comes out, I don't do it too often. Listen, it's not my full-time business. It's more passion. I love food. And yeah, if I can make a few bucks out of it, why not? But I got to explore all these sides, or try all these things that I never really would have. I mean, I was a journalist. That is what I did. I covered crimes, I covered stories of human interest. That is what I was doing. And now I'm cooking curry in my little kitchen and doing pop-up curry night. I mix my own spices, bag them and sell them. And, you know, um, I'm, I'm doing it here. I'm the only one that's doing it. So, on account of there not being any other chats with Indian aunties around, right? So, yeah, so it's wonderful. It's wonderful how this evolution, my personal evolution, from journalist to doing all these amazing things, experiencing all these wonderful things that are so out of the box.
But I mean, I want to show appreciation for the fact that cooking and making a curry is a storytelling form on its own, because you're not just getting some commercial curry powder that you're putting together and just kind of, throwing it out there. You've taken the family secret recipe and you're sharing it out there with the world, right? The value of that, I mean, anyone who loves a good curry will understand the value of what you're doing here. And so I feel that's your own form of story, and storytelling in its own way. At what point did you finally feel like you integrated into the village? I mean, I know you had a sense of home, and as soon as you arrived, and you just felt like the right place, which is amazing. But at one point, did you feel, okay, we're here now, and we're part of this little community?
I think it happened very organically and very quickly.
Okay.
Um, yes, I was obviously very aware, that or not aware, should I say? I was a little bit apprehensive as to how I would fit in and what the reception would be like, and would this be for me? I mean, you know, you're not really seeing people that look like you anymore, and sometimes that, we do feel that sometimes, right? In our own communities, that sense of comfort, that familiarity. And I was a little bit apprehensive about that, but I have to say it happened very quickly. I live in a place where the sense of community is very strong. It's very, very strong. In fact, I would even go so far as to say it's very reminiscent of the community I came from, Chatsworth. Yes, it's packaged very differently. Everyone's packaged very differently. But at the essence and at the core, I'm experiencing things that where I actually sit back and say, well, you know what, that used to happen in Chatsworth. The characters, the personalities, that sense of community, that sense of helping your neighbors not well, or you're not well, somebody sends over something, or somebody's got extra stuff growing in their garden. Can I drop off some tomatoes? Or I made a extra bottle of jam. Would you like one or whatever? We did that in Chatsworth. That sharing of food was, I mean, a very Chatsworth thing. It's happening here too, So it was very easy to kind of like submerge myself very quickly too.
I mean, as with any town, you've also, in the big city or the city of big smoke, you're a number in many cases. That's why we enjoy the sense of community we get in the smaller suburban areas. But there's also small town politics, right?
Mm.
As much as you go in there with like this idea of new beginnings, eventually the human dynamic comes out, and you pick up on the both the small town politics, and you can be profiled. I mean, there's a story that you share without giving away too much, where friends can profile you and expect and possibly even scam you. I mean, let's
Yeah.
talk about some of that. You don't expect it to happen because now you've got the safe space in the form of people you think you can rely on and that you can offer reliance to, and then you're hit by a scam of some sort.
So
Let's chat
that was
about
that was yeah, that was quite a bit of an eye opener. Like you say, you come to a small village and you think, oh, good wholesome values and morals, and everybody's like kumbaya and it's wonderful. But there's a lot of shenanigans going on, and that is definitely part of the landscape of a small village. Any small village, anywhere actually, you're going to put a group of people together in a small space. Interesting things are going to happen. So yes, we the scamming incident was quite an eye opener and a bit like a jolt to the system, because you didn't really think that it's going to happen here. You are in a city and you're constantly looking over your shoulder, and you have a very sort of cliched image of what the criminal looks like, and suddenly it's this most unassuming individual befriends you, and then boom, and literally, I mean, it did knock the wind out of our sails. And but there again, you're in a confined space. We're all in a small space. These are people that you're going to have to see every day anyway. Whether it's at the local shop or on the street or whatever, you're going to see them every single day. And it's those interpersonal politics, and how we navigated through that. And humor is, like I said to you, humor has been an important part of this book. So even the strange stories, even the awkward, messy stories. The humor had to be there. The humor had to be there because if it's not, then you're on a road to nowhere, And it's a small village. It's a small village. That's the favorite line. But yeah, so it was interesting also in the fact that you don't think it's going to happen here, and it did, and that's why I wrote about it. Um, because I did find it quite shocking you know. But having said that, we survived. We're still here, and it is what it is. At the end of the day, but there's nowhere you're going to go, and that's probably one of the things to take away from that particular incident. There's nowhere that you're going to go and not experience those things or be able to escape it. You know.
It's quite a sobering life lesson to say, okay, you can go in with the best of intentions, but you don't know how you're being profiled. I mean, people saying, oh, these people came up from the big city. I'm sure they have money. Let's take our shot or whatever.
Yes.
But that
Yes.
memory remains then in the community. It reverberates, right? It's an energy,
Yes.
your
Yes.
intentions, your actions. So it is what it is. I love when you bring up these references, like, what kind kachra ways, and then you bring up like concepts of racism. Let's talk about racialization, racism, and like the kind of, these kachra ways
Yeah.
that we still have to
Yes.
grapple with.
Look, it's absolutely kachra away, But like I said, where are you going to go and not have some kachra? And that's what it is, and it's for me as well. The personal part of it was maybe I am naive to an extent, Maybe I am naive to an extent because I think, okay, well, it's not going to be like that. But these people exist, and they exist everywhere. What are we doing with with what happens. What are we doing with that? I could absolutely rage, and what do I achieve by raging? You know, I can write my story, and I can write my story in a funny way, and hopefully, it's a realization for somebody, and it's an eye opener for others. So you're never going to go anywhere. And we talk about race and racism, and it almost always seems like it's got to be a black and white thing or a brown and white thing. But there was a particularly interesting incident, that involved a school principal who was called a racist. And I've had personal experience with this person. And it was two very disgruntled mothers who were looking to settle a personal score. And thought by using racism could rile up a political party to protest at the school and vilify this person. And I happened to come to her defense because I did not for one second believe that she was racist. I have mixed children in that school. Our domestic worker's child also attends that school. We've never had, if anything, I can always say that she's gone above and beyond. And so I had to confront a different kind of racism. And this was happening within a group of white people, a racism that these hard issues that demand reflection. What is racism? You know, because I have an experience with somebody who's of a different race and it's an unpleasant one. Is it necessarily racism? And I use a word in there, or is it people that just behave badly and they behave badly to pretty much everybody? And I know it's not what everyone wants to hear, but I, at some point, had to also, you know, I had to, at some point, to also balance the two, and actually really look at it hard. Is is this racism? Is every encounter, a bad encounter with somebody of another race group, necessarily racism, or just sometimes is it just somebody behaving like an a-hole, right? And the book explores all of that through personal experiences, through things that I have seen, through things I have witnessed, through things that I have very much been a part of.
I love how through the use of, like I said, the anecdotal references and satire, and really, really paying attention to detail about people in South Africa, you've managed also to form your own form of activism through this writing, which is what I really enjoyed as well. Your philosophies come through, your activism, and just calling out what still remain, issues in our social dynamic is a very important part of this, but it's done in a fun and accessible way. And I think that this book is going to be enjoyed and read and picked up and should be on the bookshelf of every South African who still wants and still hopes for a better future. And I think that in a time when we live in with so much of sort of angst and difficulty, this is the tome with hope against despair. Vanessa, thank you so much for your time this evening. Where can we find you in the next few weeks to come with launches?
I am definitely going to be heading to Durban. Have to do one in Chatsworth.
Absolutely.
So that is, yeah. So Chatsworth and Durban's coming up soon, and then we kind of you ride the wave and see what happens where. Um, but thank you so much. What an absolute privilege to be able to chat to you and to be on Salam Media. I'm very grateful, um, and I appreciate it very much. And I just wanted to say, we're living in a time where there's a lot of terrible things happening in this world. The despair and the heartbreak is there's global trauma at the moment. There's global trauma, and I think it can all make you feel quite despondent and helpless. And I always say, and it's not just me. I had a conversation with Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, and I was actually feeling very low. And he said, by good, you're changed forever. And if I leave if the book leaves anybody with anything, and if I have to leave anybody with anything, that is one of the ultimate messages and themes of the book. You know, you will suffer obstacles, you will suffer indignity at times, but I hope to God it never stops you from losing your humanity and your kindness and your compassion, especially in those moments when you actually feel you can't give anymore and you're so angry. The world needs more love and compassion and humanity right now.
Once again, thank you so, so much for that message. And I think we leave with that powerful kind of, um, hope left in our minds with this interview, and definitely with this book as well. Once again, we've just run out of time. I wish we'd had more time to get into this, but I know that we'll be coming out to the launches and reading more from you in the next few weeks. Thank you once again so much for your time, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you, Shafinaz.
And so that's it. We heard from Vanessa Govender about her writing, her activism, and The Village Indian. Do get yourself a copy. That's it from us from season 12 of Book Bites. We look forward to more in the weeks to come. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.